Welcome to the first grassroots coaching webinar from the FAI. Welcome Head of Coach Education, Niall O'Regan, and also from the FAI Coach Education Department, Ross Kenny and Rob Sweeney. We've had some great feedback and some good questions in from various coaches around the country and internationally as well. Thanks very much for everybody for their questions sent through. Niall, just to start off, one of the questions come in concerning the player pathway. What sort of changes have come in since the player pathway was first introduced to the FEI?
Yeah, well, so one of the biggest changes obviously came in 2015 with the player development plan, and Root Doctor has been significant in terms of the implementation of the player development plan, and the direct relationship with coach education came within that with one of the recommendations, which in simple terms really saw coach education being aligned with the player development plan. So since 2015, there's been substantial change within coach education, specifically as well in grassroots. One of the core changes for us has been the entry routes, where in the past we had quite a linear structure, while now it's very much all about reality-based learning, which is a core principle within UEFA's learning principles. And what we have is coaches can now enter in relation to the age of the player they're working with. And that means that a coach, if they're working with the adult game, within the adult game, they can do the adult amateur license, or if they're working with 10-year-olds, they can do the PDP2. So that's really important to make sure that when a coach is entering our formal structure, that they're doing so in the reality of what they're going to be working with. So there's much more transfer for that coach. They can take home the learnings from the course and put it into practicality in their own environment. So that's probably one of the most significant changes. In addition to that, obviously then is the optional route, where we now work on transitioning through the program based on hours. So coaches can now actually select workshops to which they supplement that entry route. So a coach may enter at the PDP2 and then decide to do a futsal intro or a goalkeeping intro, because there might be areas of interest or areas of weakness that they want to work upon. And the coach then just accumulates coach educational grassroots hours up to 40 hours before entering the national pathway. So it's a really interactive and engaging pathway now, and it's been great to see how over the last number of years, every year we're increasing our numbers, where we're now working off of 13 to 15,000 coaches on an annual basis, which is phenomenal engagement.
Ross, just to take up that point, when you do implement the coaching, the player pathway, and it's broken down into some of the elements that Niall alluded to there, is there a danger that the formation or the importance of a formation can kind of go missing a little bit with regard if you're doing like a 9v9s or 7v7 games?
Yeah, so we go by the 1-4-3-3 formation, and we use this formation because it's research and evidence based across Europe as the best formation to develop attacking players. And when we're doing 9v9, 7v7, 5v5 workshops, we're taking it back from the 11v11 game. So we're stripping down, keeping the key players in the key positions, and taking away the less relevant players. So you might, in a 9v9, you might play 1-2-3-3 or a 1-4-3-1. And the 1-4-3-1 might become a 1-2-3-3 when you're attacking, and this, you're keeping the key players in the key positions. That's the formation we use, and it's the formation we recommend. We're not saying that you have to use this formation. If you're going to use other formations, I don't know, like example for a 1-4-4-2, you might strip it back in 9v9 or as a 1-4-2-2 or a 1-2-4-2, but you're still keeping the key players in the key positions. Because when it does transition to 11v11, then it's seamless, and the communication has already been built in the 9v9, 7v7, and 4v4 or 5v5 games.
That's a lot of mathematical equations there for people to work out, but I'm sure coaches understand what you're saying there in terms of the different formations. Niall, there's going to be changes to the pathway coming as well, isn't there?
Yeah, it's really exciting time in terms of the UEFA coaching convention, because it's probably been a year of significant change where they're making the most substantial changes. It's been in existence for 20 years, and for us, we'll be implementing those changes, and we've started that process indirectly behind the scenes. But in September, we're going to launch the next stage of the pathway, which is 2021 to 2025. And one of the exciting changes that we're going to do within the grassroots section is the inclusion of a UEFA Leaders Award, which will be like a pinnacle step in terms of progression within coach education for grassroots coaches. And that's really about transitioning our current elite grassroots license to that UEFA Leaders Award and giving coaches that are working in a grassroots game a UEFA qualification that stands over them as being elite coaches in a grassroots environment, because we all know them, we've all worked with them, in terms of having a coach that has spent 20 or 30 years in a grassroots game and will always stay in the grassroots game. And it's great to now have a standalone qualification for them. So it's a really exciting time in terms of coach education. And I know Rob Sweeney has been significantly involved in the development of the PDP3 and the adult amateur license. And I think it'd be good for Rob to talk about the changes that we're working on that now.
Yeah, so I'm going to take us through a little piece on the PDP3 youth intro first. It's another example of the age-specific entry points to the pathway. The PDP3 youth intro course concentrates on coaches working with players aged between under 13 and 18. We've tried to design a new concept around the session plans, a real focus on warm-ups specific to the function that the coach is trying to develop. So, for example, an attacking warm-up that then leads into attacking practices. So a little bit more specific and maximising that amount of training time that we do have on the pitch. The courses also then include a number of group tasks. A big influence or a big consideration for the course is that development of young players, an introduction to, I suppose, coaches working with parents also, and then a discussion around the principles of play. The adult amateur license then, I suppose, stems from our reflections upon the adult intro course from our previous pathway. We acknowledge that there probably isn't a need for an intro at this level. We wanted to aim it towards coaches that maybe have just finished playing the senior game and they're now getting introduced into that coaching pathway. So we really wanted to focus the course on a specific skill set required to work with these players, for example, through tactical setups, set pieces and team talks.
Rob, can you talk a little bit about how you guys use technology in coach education and how you'll be pushing that on kind of in the future?
Yeah, so technology, I suppose, plays a massive part in people's lives in terms of how accessible it is at the moment. And it's also then important to acknowledge its importance in sports development. I suppose from an association point of view and a coach education point of view, we have to take and consider the practical applications of using technology within the grassroots game, because it is something that is typically associated with the elite, and we need to make that now more accessible to coaches across all levels at a fraction of the cost. An example of this would be through Huddle's performance analysis. It's a tool that we use that we can evaluate players' abilities or performance through video analytics. Our hope is to hopefully help coaches to be able to engage with players and be more specific around their session plans. I suppose an interesting thing also that just happens to coincide with this conversation is Avenir Sports, our performance analysis partners, are actually doing a competition to give coaches the opportunity to win 5 Huddle bronze license. Now, not each coach gets 5, but 1 license for 5 different people. Keep an eye on your emails from Niall O'Regan and social media platforms for that. From a course point of view, typically technology is built in and around the CPD requirements. We see it as a tool to top up knowledge and maybe not introduce new tasks, and also its importance around feedback. Then we don't want to move too far away from the importance of coaches and coach educators working on the pitch. So it's trying to then maximize both the use of technology and the practical application of actually coaching with players on the pitch. And then also, just if you are using technology within your clubs, really important to consider that child welfare side of things, and ensuring that there's permission from parents and guardians in order to use that video for the use of hopefully maximising each player's potential.
Niall, just to kind of touch on something that Rob's alluding to there in that kind of area, is it kind of age specific, and how you kind of mentioned it there with the player pathway stuff as well. For a grassroots coach who might be thinking, what sort of level do I need to get up to, qualification wise? What would you say in regard to that with age specific?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things for us is we really work off educational research in terms of the adult learning principles from UEFA, reality-based learning being one of those key things. But for ourselves in coach education, we really work on a learner-centered approach. And that is really demonstrated on the basis of if you have a parent or a volunteer, they come in and they start coaching because their son or daughter is playing within the team, and they may have a background in sport, they may be a teacher, or they may be just somebody that's willing to start off and have no background whatsoever in football. And that's why the age specific courses are so good, because what you have is a scenario in which you can do the PDP one for 6 to 9 year old, for somebody working within that environment. And really, like any coaching course, and I always say this even at the highest end, when you finish a coaching course, that's when the real learning starts, because what we're doing is giving you the confidence to go and work in that environment. And then really what you have to do is take the material, take what you've learned from the course and make it your own, because none of us coach in the same way. So if sometimes there are people that want to do a coaching course and they look at it like an academic program, like a 4-year degree, I want to do this in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. It's not really like that. Really what you need to be doing is you do a course and you spend a year or two minimum. Like if you look at the UEFA qualifications, they mandate that you have to do 12 months of practical experience in the environment relevant to the qualification. So similar to that in the grassroots, we would be saying to somebody working with a 6-year-old, go and do the PDP 1 and then spend 2 years really honing your skills. And it's like as the player develops, you then need to develop as a coach. And for everyone within grassroots coach education, there is going to be formal CPD from 2021 onwards. And we've been doing that over the last number of years. And it's not just going to be paid CPD, there will be significant free CPD where we'll be giving workshops. For example, our U15 head coach, Jason Donoghue, has delivered a number of workshops based around the principles of play that they implement at 15s level. So it's really about giving people at the relevant age the relevant skills that they need to be able to implement. And really what I would see is and hope, and we've worked with a number of clubs throughout the country in developing club structures where a grassroots coach would transition through the grassroots pathway, and by the time their son or their daughter or that person that was the immediate reason they came into football, they become teenagers, they should then be doing the PDP3 and moving towards the National D licence. And at that point in time, that's how the club retain these people, because the club will have supported them in terms of giving them the access to being a coach and working with their teams, and may have given them some monetary support as well. So the reality then is that that's one really key way of saying, well, now your son or daughter might be leaving, but you're a National D licensed coach. We want to keep you and we want to work with you and continue to educate you towards the National C licence and the UEFA Leaders Award and specialist courses in futsal and goalkeeping and football fitness. And that's really the key thing for us, is that we're looking long term at not only introducing coaches into age specific programs, but into introducing them step by step, so that when they do decide to make that decision whether they stay involved, that they will, because they'll have the skill set, they'll have the competence, the knowledge and the experience. So it's really important for me to say that clubs should be looking and targeting at, based on the club mark, we talk about the coaching coordinator having a minimum of a National D licence, and I think that's a very good reference for grassroots clubs.
Just for anybody who's unaware, CPD, continuous professional development, so kind of tracking your progress as a coach all the way through, and I think that's important across all the things that you do in coach education. Ross, to kind of give you a very kind of simple kind of question here, which won't be simple to ask, but maybe not to answer, but is there a key message that coaches can deliver to players that's almost universal, that no matter what way you're setting your team up, you're doing your training sessions, or what your aims are, is there a key message that can carry through?
I'm not sure if there's a one message fits all here, because each player is different. Each player has different objectives. Some players are playing for fun. Some players are playing just because their friends are playing. Some are playing then to get a career in the game and progress into elite level. So ultimately, I suppose, having a love for the game, wanting to play the game, and enjoying the game would be a key message, as well as respect. Respect is a big one on our PDP plan. To respect your coaches, respect your teammates, respect your opponents, respect the referees, and take that with you throughout your career.
Rob, at the moment we're obviously going through a difficult time that football's on hold during the coronavirus pandemic. How would you advise coaches getting ready to, when we do come back to playing football and getting organised, to prepare for that comeback, in terms of the coaching their players?
Yeah, it's something I've given a little bit of consideration to myself. First of all, I've no doubt the players will want to come back, and I think they'll be extremely ambitious in terms of their work rate when they do come back, because being in isolation is difficult, and I suppose missing training is probably something that everybody's struggling to deal with. Something I've been looking to really do would be to emphasise that fun element of the training session, and remind players how much they do love to come training, just to ensure that we do at the grassroots level get a continuous attendance each week. I suppose, how do we emphasise that fun element of the game? One of the ideas I've had is player-led training sessions. Now, I don't mean that they go and play heads and volleys for an hour and a half, but giving the players a little bit of ownership in terms of maybe what topics we look at, what practices that they've previously worked on or taken part in, and how they might, I suppose, introduce them to the sessions themselves. And then from that point of view, I suppose we can have that idea around utilising what isolation has taught us. For example, the FAI Grassroots Skills Programme, players practicing at home, honing their skills, not just while training. So can we try and take that through, yes, when they do come back, re-engaging with team training, also to maintain the things they have learned in isolation in terms of their own individual player development plans. And then I suppose a consideration for all coaches would be the football fitness element. We can't just go back to playing 90-minute games or 45-minute halves or 40-minute halves, depending on the age group that you're with. There is a time period where we will have to gradually reintroduce players to the actions, and I suppose from a fitness point of view, building them back up to the level to be able to compete at whatever level they are competing at. So there's a couple of considerations and a couple of ideas that in how we can re-engage players post COVID-19.
Niall, one of the key points there is Rob mentioned isolation there, and the teamwork and the team unity that you hear footballers talking about all the time. It's something that they miss. I suppose coaches have a part to play in this as well, don't they? Because when people kind of think of coaching, they can kind of focus very heavily on technique, but there's so many other elements that a coach could bring to players, and that helps with other things. For example, mental health and fitness, as Rob alluded to as well.
Yeah, definitely, and I think there, to sort of reiterate something that was discussed or touched on earlier, that unified message. One of the key things with us in coach education is that we have and we work off the basis of a universal football action language, and key things within that universal language as the hierarchy being communication, decision making, execution, and football fitness. And communication is the key thing, because that's at the highest order, and that comes across in everything that we do. And I always say to grassroots coaches that they have to realize that if you're a parent or a volunteer and you're making the decision to contribute back to your community by becoming a coach in your local club, you're now making that transition to no longer being just a parent and a volunteer. You're now becoming a coach, and as a coach, you're a teacher. And with that becomes huge responsibilities, because when you enter and you're working with your son or daughter and you have a way in which you deal with them, that way may not work for the other people that you're working with. And one of the key things I always answer the question to is, how do you know if you're a good coach? The players will tell you. Player football will tell you. If your players decide in today's modern society to train 1 or 2 nights a week and turn up at weekends and play for your team, it's because they respect you as a coach and they want to work with you. And for young people, if you look at young people, you take a 14-year-old these days, they're probably only adult they can choose in their life to be in around is their coach, because they don't choose their parents, they don't choose their teachers, they don't choose their family members, the community that they're living within. They're really having all of those choices made by their parents. So the reality is, if they don't want to work with you as a coach, they'll tell their parents, and the parents will make that choice for them. And the reality for us is that we have to make sure that those coaches know that the pat on the back is, if your players turn up, they're telling you that they respect you, they want to be around you, and they see you as a role model. And that role model then touches on all of those things that you talked about. Mental health is a key thing. Our development officers are absolutely phenomenal in terms of the delivery of coach education. And we've worked with them in terms of all of the changes and had substantial amount of training and making sure that they're aware of what they need to do. And we use that as a funnel in terms of we master down what we see as best practice to the coach educators, the development officers, the auxiliary coach educators, and they then do it to coaches, who then layer to the players. And the player-centered approach is key, because everything that we do in coach education is in thought of how it's going to impact the player. And one of the things we did in terms of mental health was we linked in with the company Jigsaw, and they've been delivering a free workshop around the country, which has been phenomenal, and the engagement has been great. But it's really important for us that when a coach makes that decision, or a parent or a volunteer makes that decision to become a coach, that they understand the roles and responsibilities within that, because they really are becoming a mentor, a positive role model, and they can have a significant positive or negative impact. And I think one of the key things for me, Gareth, whenever we speak about it, or we speak with our senior internationals when they come in at the higher end of the spectrum in the UEFA licenses, they all reference back to the positive impact that a grassroots coach has had. And that's always something that has stood out to me, and it's something that needs to be identified, that the grassroots level is the most important level. The most important coaches that we have are those coaches working with the 5 to 10-year-olds, because as Ross said, they're the ones that will decide or how they impart whether a player loves the game and stays within the game, and that's really important for us.
It's a really great point, Ross, isn't it? Because as Niall said, the lessons you learn from your coaches at that age level will carry through for the rest of your life. In many ways, the things that you pick up, not just from a coaching point of view in terms of technique, as I said, but mannerisms, body language, how you treat people, how you communicate with teammates, respect, as you guys have mentioned as well. That's all really important. These are building blocks to someone's character almost.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as part of the PDP plan was aligned, respect is huge in it, and breaking it back down to the small side of games. This is all done for the player. It's all done for the player to develop within the team setting. And coaches need to be aware of that, and need to be aware that the emphasis is on the coach developing the player and the individual within the team, and not about the team winning. So to follow the guidelines that are in the PDP plan, the minimum game time, making roll on, roll off substitutions regularly, and making sure that the player is getting the best possible chance to improve, because every player will develop at different stages. And following on from that, in the PDP1 and PDP2 courses, we'll talk about the coach and the role of the coach, and like Niall said, how to be a good role model. We'll go through the characteristics of what it is to be a good role model for the coach, and the skills required, and we'll go through the characteristics of the player, so the coach can understand the player that they're coaching at that age group, and how what's required and what's needed.
Rob, can I ask you about when a coach is kind of halfway through a season with their team, how do you track the improvement of a player, and how do you kind of maybe challenge the player in that regard, like, and mix it up maybe as well? Like, obviously, coaches will pick up tips from the courses that they go on with you guys as well, but like, what's a kind of key element in all that?
Look, there's a couple of different scenarios and examples I can use to help answer this question. Firstly, we're looking to, as a team, to define what success is. So some people might see success as winning a trophy, and some people might see success as players playing a certain amount of time over a length of period, or over a period of time. But for me, the biggest thing would be including players and parents in terms of their goal setting out goals that not only focus on where they want to be, but focus on the process of how they're going to get there. Because we don't want to allow this period of time to pass them by. So really focusing in on that process of how do I get to the level, or how do I fulfill my potential. An example from my own experiences in the past season would be a team that competed in the initial stages of the National League, lost a consecutive amount of games, and then as a coach or as players, you're questioning, is there an improvement happening here? As parents, is this the right environment for my player? And as the season progressed, because we attempted to focus the players and concentrating on the process, on each of those little steps in terms of developing their ability in the attacking side of the game, the transition side of the game, and the defending side of the game, as the season progressed, we were able to see major improvements. And because they focused on that process and not just the end goal in terms of the result, they were able to play without pressure, play freely, and really hone the skills that they were required to hone to get to the level that they wanted to. And I suppose at the end of the season, the players actually won something, which is not a scenario that always necessarily happens, but at our post-season review, we were able to really highlight with the parents from where the players started, the process that they followed, the dedication to that process, to where they then ended up, rather than just always focusing where I want to be, really fall in love with that process and allow that process to take place.
I'll have to say, like, this is a million miles away from when I was a kid and we were told to do laps around the pitch. Like, this is it's very modern, very professional. Can I just ask you there, Rob alluded to there, National League level. A lot of people would say, that we should have every gap filled, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17, 18, all the way up to senior level, the SSC or Electricity League. What's your view on that? Like, obviously, of the work that's been done and, those potential gaps.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's like anything, change is difficult. And when you're living through the change point of view, you really just want to get to the end. And I think that's something Rob even alluded to himself. Everybody really wants to just sort of get to that end product, the winning, the success, the trophy. But that doesn't happen overnight, and Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think when you look at what Ruth Doctor specifically has done in high performance, being part of that high performance unit and being an integral part of it with all of the guys within it, you really understand the work that goes on behind the scenes and the work that he has done to ensure that we really are building a high performance environment and culture, as you said yourself, from grassroots up. You see it with grassroots coaches now. They're so professional. The time that they give is no longer just arriving a minute before a session and thinking what they're going to do. They're planning, they're preparing, they're designing training sessions, they're reflecting on training sessions. We're building communities of practice where coaches are sharing what they're doing on social media. They're interacting, they're challenging each other. You have performance analysis within the grassroots game from Avenir Sports. It's absolutely phenomenal what we're doing in Irish football. And for me, it's a really exciting time. I look at over a very short period of time, over the last 5 years, the 19s, 17s, 15s and 13s National League is outstanding. And as you said yourself, when we grew up, it didn't exist. And the interleague programme was probably what represented those competitions, and we still have that. The interleague programme was something that is very close to my heart, because it was where I honed all of my skills, and I got the chance to work with top talented players. And it wasn't about winning trophies, it was about developing players. And I enjoyed working with the likes of Alan Brown, one of our current senior internationals. And we look back on those interleague competitions with great fond memories. And it's great that we now have that situation where we're providing elite levels for all levels, because you now have players transitioning from the amateur clubs into the professional underage leagues. And you still have that interleague representative football available for the next level of player, which is phenomenal that we're able to deliver so many opportunities for players to challenge themselves at different levels. And the key thing here is players will come into it, and Ross alluded to it, they come into it, and the key ingredient that we have to have from the outset is fun. We want our players to love the game because we want to retain them, because in 20 years time, 30 years time, they may be retained in terms of becoming a referee, in terms of becoming an administrator within a club, becoming a coach, a manager, whatever it is. And the only way you keep people in our game is if they love the game, and that starts from the grassroots. But for me, I think over the next 10 years, you look at the successes that we've had and the phenomenal results that we have. You look at Tom Mohan. What is something that jumped out at me is that Tom Mohan had one of the most successful under-19 campaigns that we've had in a long time, and he did it with a large group of his better players unavailable, but was never mentioned by Tom. Tom just focused on the quality of player that he had available. And the key thing to this is the players that were available were unbelievable. And he still had 5 or 6 players that were of a similar or a better quality with more experience of playing at a higher level unavailable. So the reality is the fruits of the labour of the underage leagues and the phenomenal work being done within the underage leagues, and we see it with the engagement that they have in coach education at UEFA B licence, UEFA A, Elite Youth A licence and Pro licence. We see the work being done in terms of clubs developing their coaches, and the fruits of those labours are going to come through in the next couple of years, because you're really always judged on your senior team. And I'm really excited, and I genuinely believe this, that the next 10 years are probably going to be the best, in my opinion, at this moment in time. With excitement, I'm looking forward to it, that they could be the best 10 years of Irish football's history, because we're creating really attacking-minded players, where we've got great insights into terms of our players playing at the highest levels. And I genuinely believe you'll see the gaps that people talk about in the underage leagues, those gaps will be filled. You can imagine 5 years ago, if we tried to implement 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17s, 18s, 19s, it would be impossible, because you have to help the clubs transition to it. It has to take time. You have to allow them to settle into the process. And I guarantee in the next 10 years, you'll see additional layers being included, more steps being included, more alignment. I know within the structural changes, you're going to see more of an emphasis in terms of having a presence in every individual club, both an FAI presence and a club person, whether it be within Club Mark, we call that person the coaching coordinator. So for us in the FAI to have one person in every club that we can actually communicate with and make sure our messages of best practice are getting out there, it's a really exciting time in Irish football.
Ross, would you share that enthusiasm that Niall expresses there? Obviously, the player development is clear to see, as Niall says, with not just international level, but national league level as well. But from a coach education point of view, it seems to be a very exciting time.
Definitely huge. And we've seen the numbers in coach education grow and grow constantly, and the amount of coaches wanting to get involved is really, really encouraging. And the courses are designed and hopefully for the coaches to develop and coaches to feel welcome and open and want to engage with us as much as possible, because we want the coaching courses not to be about the coach educators, but to be about the coach and the coach that's participating on the course. But it's definitely an exciting time in terms of coach education with the developments that are happening in PDP1, PDP2, PDP3, adult intro, and in the PDP1 and PDP2 courses, there's a focus, like I mentioned earlier, on the grassroots and the role model, how you become a good role model. There's an objective about developing the individual within the team setting, a focus on football action related practices, where players are being challenged and players have communication, decision and execution within those practices. And as Rob mentioned earlier about the isolation activities and the online initiative from Grassroots, is excellent for players to practice in their home setting. But when we get into our team setting, that we focus on small-sided games and we focus on football action related practices. And we've seen on our coach education courses, the number of coaches that have come on, the knowledge that the coaches already have is fantastic. And the coach educators are learning and are open and are picking nuggets off the coaches around the course as well. So it's a really exciting time.
Guys, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. Really good stuff there. I think people will take a lot from your answers and your insights there. And just to anybody who's watching this, we'd love your feedback. Get in touch through the coach education channels, FAI Coach Ed on social media, and obviously keep an eye out for future courses and dates that are going to come up as well. So thanks very much, and we appreciate your feedback.